Good morning and welcome to Coffee Time with Kauffman, the comfortable place to talk about women's leadership. Today, I'm doing something a little different. I'm here with Mel Butcher as we do a mic swap, and Mel becomes the interviewer, and I am the interviewee. Hey, Mel.
Hey, Maria, how's it going?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for being here with me and doing this unique little mic swap.
It's my pleasure, and I really love to interview people. So I'm anxious to learn more about you, and I know that your listeners are as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So I am drinking a flavored I think it's a wild raspberry. They threw in a new flavor in my assorted mixture. What are you drinking today, Mel?
I've just got some iced coffee today. I think I was drinking the exact same thing last time we talked, actually.
Awesome. As an engineer turned life coach, I help women handle anything and enjoy life. Women are born to discover and leverage their personal leadership essence. I help women have fun transformations from imposter to immune by building a strong personal brand. Advancing a woman's career is the single most powerful and strategic way to empower women, save the planet, and bring more happiness to the world. Following the 5 natural steps to advance a career for a dream life offers a comfortable framework for change. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mel.
All right. Okay. So we're going to get into some personal stuff today, I think, but this is all going to be in the context of career and leadership. So let's go through a bit of a timeline, some things in life that might have impacted your career. Take us back to that transitionary period, high school to college. What would you say led you to studying engineering?
Awesome. So I'm going to share a really, really early memory, and then I'll get us right into high school. So my first very, very prominent, like large imprint was being with my family way back in the day before you even had remote controls on TVs. I had 2 older brothers, a younger sister, mom and dad. So we would assemble in the TV room to watch TV. Most likely it was like the Love Boat on a Friday night or something, right? And I remember sitting on the couch. We had one couch that sat like 3 people and then a chair. Not enough for all 6 people. And we would take turns. Some people had to sit on the floor to watch TV every night. So I remember being on the couch with my mother and father. And my father, who didn't graduate, he went to the 8th grade. I think was the highest grade that he went through in school, questioned my mother. And he said, "What is 13 times 15?" This was 2-digit math. And I was in elementary school at about the time you're learning 2-digit multiplication math, right? As soon as he said it, and he's saying this to my mother, he's clearly asking her for some help with this multiplication problem. But my mind went right into it. I solved the problem. I spit out the answer as my mother is still trying to do the math for him. But I got there quick. And I can remember the look on my mother's face when I spit out that answer before her. And I knew I had done something good, like, yeah, like, did I get the answer right? Like, I was all excited about this accomplishment. But she looked at me as if it was weird. It was just a weird moment where it was kind of like, you knew you should be celebrated, but at the same time, there was this obvious reality that I was smarter in math than both of my parents. So that definitely left an impression. I kind of figured I had that card up my sleeve. And I figured, well, math is going to be my thing. If nothing else, pans out, I always have this math thing. And I'm sure that formed me throughout, school. I get to 10th grade and I take the differential aptitude test, which is a typical thing in 10th grade. It's a very different kind of test. you get the results. And I remember getting the results and them saying that I should get into engineering. I went right home to my mother and I was like, Mom, I do not want to drive a train for the rest of my life. And she laughed. Her reaction was a little bit of laughter. She was like, that's not really what an engineer does. And at the time, I had a cousin who was actually going through college as an electrical engineer. So I started to do my homework. Another, I guess, superpower was percolating in me, in that when I got to one of those situations in life and it was like, oh, I thought engineering was driving a train. And my mother's like, no, that's has nothing to do with it. I went into research mode. So I started figuring out, well, what does an engineer do? And the little bit of information that I was able to come across at school in the guidance counselor's office on colleges, I was like hooked. I was like, oh yeah, this, whatever this engineering thing is, it's definitely for me. So I started to pursue that. The next thing I really remember is not only applying for colleges, but being accepted. And I didn't apply to too many. We didn't have a lot of money. So I couldn't afford application, that process extensively. So I probably took like 2 or 3 colleges, and I did the research before to be very strategic so that when I spent that money, it came in very, very handy. So I get accepted to Widener University, which I eventually go to. And I'm sure I applied to Penn State somewhere. Now, being in the state of Pennsylvania is a pretty normal thing to do. So I get accepted to college, and naturally in life, what happens when you're a senior in high school is that people just ask you, well, where are you going to college, or what are you doing? I guess insinuating that you're going to go to college. When they find out you're going to college, they ask you what your major is. Very normal question. This was the first time I heard the term a man's world. And every time an adult would ask me these questions, and I would say engineering, the very first reaction seemed to be like, well, isn't that a man's world? The first one, I thought, maybe this guy doesn't get out much. Well, maybe he doesn't know what the real world is. Like, what is he saying, this man's world thing? But the more and more that engagement repeated, the more it sunk into me, like, what am I getting into? And a level of insecurity definitely came with it. And I guess I felt my innocence at the time, like maybe I don't know what the world is and what are they talking about with this man's world thing. So, and then I got to college and I'm like pretty much almost the only woman in the room. There was, I definitely remember three women that graduated with me. It was a pretty small class. There was probably more, of course, in the beginning, but that's pretty typical for engineering as well.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking what year you graduated?
I graduated 1987.
Okay. Yeah. And, if we look at the numbers today, women who are graduating from some of those specific engineering disciplines, electrical and mechanical, for example, the number is low for women. So we still have a lot of work to do, let's say.
A lot of work to do. Yes. Yep. So that's what got me into college.
So you mentioned to me in a separate conversation that you felt like you were on this kind of non-traditional path. Could you say more about that feeling and how it might have made your choices or even your opportunities early in your career different from people who are traditional?
When I heard you use that term, that was probably the first time there was a term that I could associate with this. I don't even know what to call it. I think it's been with me and informing me all of my life. I think even in elementary school, it's a tough time growing up anyways, but you go to school and, some kids are wearing the cool sneakers first and, you kind of notice those things, right? that's a very outward and materialistic way. But there was also, for me, there was another aspect to it that when you said non-traditional, I was like, that's it. Traditionally, you expect, to be in these families that really cultivate and grow up this family in the Beaver Cleaver way, right? That was the heavy influence when I was really young, like that's what life is supposed to look like. And none of that image ever made sense for me. And I don't know if it was because I was just uniquely so different, but I definitely felt probably all of my life that something about me and my environment is different from what I saw most everywhere else. So it definitely informed me. I mean, coming from a small town, we were not very rich in materialistic ways. I was driven then to make sure that I was going to overcome that obstacle. I didn't want, to live so modestly, I'll say, and not just from a materialistic standpoint. My vision, even rather young, on having a family and raising children of my own, I wanted to figure out this other aspect of the non-traditional thing is how can I get like massive love and support and guidance and to really feel just heroically confident, like you watch in Wonder Woman, right? I mean, those were the comics that I was raised on too. So I'm seeing some of these things in life that seem more on that traditional line. And I thought, man, how do I get that? Because I'm starving and I'm not getting a lot of those things. So it has definitely formed everything for me.
I'd like to ask you to describe what your early career looked like, and in particular, maybe some of the challenges that you faced early on.
That's interesting. Thank goodness I was kind of raised in this non-traditional way because it set me up in a survival mode that was perfect for me at the time as I entered my career at the time that I did. So I basically have this idea, and my two older brothers, they were very, very close in age in front of me. And we were so poor. I don't think my parents even had enough to make a gender discrimination. It was like you just threw the kids all, you lumped them in. So if dad was kind of teaching the boys, like, boys don't cry, or, some of those, very, very male stereotypical, influences, the father son type of thing, I was taking that on myself. So if my dad was teaching the boys, I was learning that. And I wanted to be in that environment, and it lined me up perfect. So by the time I'm going in and I'm seeing that I'm the only woman, I don't see that. Even though I see it, I like that survival mode was so heavy in my instincts that I just learned to somehow operate in the environments that I was in without worrying about all the negativity that came with it. And I love just to learn. So as long as I had an opportunity, I was just going to go for it and just figure out how to ask questions. And just that's all I really remember is just, getting co-ops. That was one of the smartest things I did was in college, get into the co-op program so that I could get work experience before I graduated. That was great because that was a little bit of a nurturing environment where you can kind of go in and have the job. And almost I had the best bosses during that time because they were just like, yeah, just have fun. Just come to work and have fun. And I took that to heart. But I also just wanted to learn as much as I could. So as long as somebody was paying me to do something, here's a quick little story is that I remember in college, Lotus 1-2-3 was coming out. It's a spreadsheet application, right? In competition with Microsoft Excel. So I needed in class to learn Lotus 1-2-3 to if you wanted maybe to use that. I think it was more like an option. And I struggled to get myself motivated to learn Lotus 1, 2, 3 while in class, right? Because in class, nobody's paying me to do the work. The next cycle of co-op that comes around, and I'm still in college, not even a lot of time passes by, but now the tables turn and somebody's paying me to do this work. That was the easiest motivator, to get over that learning hurdle. And all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I can learn anything. I'll learn Lotus 1, 2, 3. And I did it, and it was not a challenge. So some of those little milestones were presenting themselves, and I was just noticing how I handled that work life. And I did well, as a worker. So as long as somebody was going to give me a job, I was going to do whatever it took to do my best.
So I wonder if you might walk us through a high level look at your career timeline and progression. I mean, just like a 30,000 foot view here. So kind of roles and advancement through your career path.
Okay. So when I graduated, now I had some experience already. So I tried to position myself the best I could so that when I graduated, I was a good candidate to get a job out of college. But it was a very, very tough time in the economy to get a job at that time. So even the best students in the class were not getting their jobs. So my first job out of college was actually a production supervisor. So not engineering at all. So I go from production supervisor, but I work tenaciously calling every month to get a consulting job. And eventually, because of that persistence, the guy said that eventually, he knew that the next time I called him and he knew I would call again, that he couldn't say no anymore. So I go to consulting. This was my mother, she just loved the idea, you dress up, you're looking like a professional, you work in a cubicle, you're in an office and you're doing drawings and specs, right? So you feel like you arrive, right? Because on some level, mom is super proud, but I was miserable. Consulting was not my thing because of that environment. But man, did I learn so much of the really meaty stuff. And I learned that stuff early, and I could carry that learning all throughout my career. It was powerful. So I go from consulting though, and I figure out I'm not meant for the office work. I need to get out into the field. So I go from consulting for a large company to a Fortune 500 company, manufacturing, travel and everything. Oh man, was I super happy. That was the life for me. The Fortune 500 company, though, at the time was going through a major overhaul, and they were outsourcing all their engineering. So I'm like, oh, man, once again, like I finally arrived in the place where I wanted to arrive. And now they're outsourcing the work. And at the time I was young enough and not experienced enough, I didn't feel comfortable managing people to do work that I felt like I didn't know how to do the work. So I left there, went to a systems integrator. Oh, and once again, that was a super cool. And the interesting part about this jump was not only when you're working for a systems integrator and you're doing project after project. Once again, it's that learning is just like super accelerated. Like within a couple of months, definitely a year or two, my growth was massive just because of the exposure. The other part there, when I graduated college and I was in that weird place where I couldn't really get a job, I started to dip into self-help books, The Road Less Traveled. I definitely read What Color is Your Parachute? And in there, I did all the exercises because I had the time. And then, life happens. I get the consulting, and then I go to the Fortune 500 company. When I go to the systems integrator, I remember, oh, this was all of the things that I had filled out in my, what color is your parachute? This was really the job for me. It's a small company, all these wonderful things. So that was an interesting path. And of course, I loved it. But then life happened. And I end up having my daughter, which changed my whole world. completely changed my world. So after that, life gets different. You know, when you're a mom, it definitely did for me. It changed my career. I did no longer was I as willing to take traveling jobs. And in my line of work, travel is almost essential. So so that, you know, just changed some things. So from there, I took some jobs that probably weren't the best for me, but they suited more my family life. And all of that, the consulting, the Fortune 500 company, and the systems integrator, those three were so pivotal and had really completely infused so much value inside of me. And I didn't know this at the time, but it definitely made me so flexible. So I was able to get to a place where I could call the shots more and have more of a family life and make it through those years.
So one theme I'm hearing is life happens. And I think that's something that is true for everyone, right? So we can all understand that unexpected things happen. I want to bring it back to leadership in a moment, but before I do that, you've mentioned here how you had your daughter that changed what you were willing to do, and you ended up taking some roles that maybe weren't ideal for you. I wonder if you might comment on the experience of being a working mother from the perspective of when you were supported well by a company, what did that look like?
And it's interesting because when I had my daughter, I was supported the best. So I'm working for the systems integrator. But this is my parachute, right? And I just want to point out quickly is that this is way hindsight, way, like today, I'm looking back on this whole thing, right? Or even in the past couple of years, and I'm realizing that there was a lot more support everywhere, all the way along, and I couldn't see it. I definitely knew I was supported with the systems integrator, and partly because that was probably a natural match, right? And it was small. My baby shower, and I'll say I had a couple, but the one that really sinks and holds the most, I have to say, holds some really, really special loving moments for me is the one that this company gave for me. All guys. All guys. So not like there was few gifts, but they went in and pitched in money so that I could go buy and I was able to buy one of those rocking chairs. So that was super special. But I wasn't used to receiving that kind of support. So a lot of times I had, unfortunately, growing up non-traditional, I'll say for me, that was definitely an impediment. There was support there that I just wasn't able to see and receive wholeheartedly. Like that was beautiful. That literally will touch me for a lifetime. And I would eventually recognize some support later on in life when I was going through what I'll call is more of a transition in my career. And you get up and over that hurdle where you understand your value a little bit more and you can push those boundaries and play in those boundaries a little bit more. But yeah, that one. And then as I started to play with those boundaries, that's where I could explore and recognize and notice where support was, where I least expected it. Did I answer your question?
Well, I'd be curious to know that. I mean, yes, you did. So I'll reflect back what I'm hearing. It sounds like your colleagues formed a community around you, and they took the initiative to show you how much they cared about you and supported you, and that's really special.
Yeah, and that was probably not only because that was kind of a more of a personal side, but
Mhm.
I was also supported in the work.
Talk about that.
So once again, it's more like a reflection later, right? So when I went in there, and one of my survival skills is to say nothing, because it's better to say nothing. I guess inside my head, I just felt like it was always difficult to come off as a smart one. Remember, I had that moment where I got the 2-digit math problem well, and I think everyone's going to be happy for me because Maria is so smart. But the look on my mother's face at the time was confusing to me. It didn't seem as, oh, good job, you're so awesome in math, right? And then all these other experiences kind of really desensitize you, like you have to hold back your talents because people are going to get offended. And now I just lost myself from the question. Say the question again.
Yeah, this can take us down another
path.
rabbit hole. I just want to say that I think there are other women who have had similar experiences, but my question is really, in a sort of corporate way, did you experience support from the companies that you worked for as a mother? And I'm just curious, like, what did that look like?
So when I was a mother in a small company, and when I first became a mother, what that looked like was, I'm breastfeeding and I'm coming to work, and I need privacy and space, and I have something that needs an electrical outlet in a bathroom that doesn't have an outlet. When you work for a company that really is supportive, you don't even have to ask for the outlet. I didn't even know I was just going to make whatever work, right? But they take care of it for you before you ask. When you work for a company that may not be as aware or supportive, right? And because maybe they want to be supportive, but they're just not even aware of how to do it. Those companies are not setting the stage for you ahead of time or even reacting in the moment. That's probably the big difference.
I appreciate that. So there's a spectrum, right? So a company that has, the first thing that I heard you describe is a company with leadership that has EQ and taking initiative to support their people, and then moving, let's say, down on the spectrum, company that wants to support but doesn't know how, doesn't take the initiative but is in a reactionary mode, all the way down to not receptive, not supportive. So
right.
Thank you for describing that for us. Okay, so let's bring it back to career and leadership. So when you reflect on leadership roles that you held later in your career, what did you learn that surprised you? So for instance, what might be something about effective leadership that you found to be true, but you didn't anticipate?
I will have to say is the thing that pops out in my experience is the same message that I want to share with all the women out there, anywhere and everywhere, is that I did not understand my power to influence. Total. And that was my gig, right? So I kind of underestimate, and I keep myself quiet. That was what I was trying to explain earlier, is because when you outwardly, like a typical stereotypical man would, bring his accomplishments to the conversation right from the handshake, right? Oh, this is who I am, and these are my accomplishments. This is what I do, right? Not me, right? I'm holding back on that stuff. So once one of my claims to fame is that I created leadership positions when they didn't exist. I saw an opportunity, and I basically kind of pointed out, hey, you have a leader for this group, but not a leader for controls and electrical. I would like to help you create that role, and I'd love to fill it, I'd love to apply for it. And not even assuming that I'm going to get it, but I see a void here. And that it came true. I helped them create that. And then I fought for that and earned that position, soup to nuts, I'll say. So that's it, is like, I did not know I had that in me. I did not know I had that power. I did not know I had that influence. And that was so bold, and it would seem to come in, I'll say, one incident in this position. It did take time. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it took a lot of time and a lot of different pieces, but I wish I kind of had something else in there just to kind of remind me and to really reflect and mirror what I had done. Because after that, had I just mirrored my own accomplishment that day moving forward, I could have continued that acceleration and really stepped into it and really owned it. But it was like, whoa, what happened here? And then it was like, all those other things started to backfill around it. So,
well, this leads really smoothly into the next question I want to ask you. So in a career that soars, the women's network I do work in, we talk about authentic and graceful self-promotion. So we probably don't have time to talk about the double bind that women face today, but you alluded to that a little bit. So we recognize that women face the double bind. So we do have to talk about our accomplishments, and we want to do that through authentic and graceful self-promotion. So I'd like to invite you to take a moment to just be unabashedly boastful and tell us about an outcome that you created as a leader that you're proud of.
So I love that you talk about the double bind too, because it does make it tricky. So one accomplishment that I would love to claim and talk about unabashedly was a huge failure.
All right, tell us about it.
Right. So I get this position with a company, and I think what really sold them when I came in, and in the world of engineering, definitely in controls, and a lot of what I do is there's always this mechanical, electrical piece. It's almost like we can't live without each other. We're tied to the hip, and we're distinctly different. But as far as leadership goes, it typically tends to be, and maybe because electrical really is the furthest one down the line, mechanical people tend to rise in the ranks of leadership more than electrical, I'll generally say, in my experience, definitely. Now, the challenge there then is, if a mechanical guy isn't savvy enough in electrical, there's an interesting dynamic that can form. So that formed. I love
that was a kind way to say that.
I think you get what I'm trying to say. So I have this interview with this company, mechanical leadership. Okay. And what I guarantee you sold me and got me the job in the interview was the fact that I like to talk about my quotes. And because I like to talk about my quotes, that's all the mechanical leader needed to know. If there's someone on the electrical side that's willing to talk, then he can probably better lead. And who knows, whatever his leadership style is, doesn't matter. They need information in order to be able to lead and discern all those things. So that gets me the job. I get into the job, and just like any new job, this one took a good year. They say on average 6 months. On a new job, it takes you 6 months really just to get established, right? So that's happening in that time frame. I'm just showing up. At this point, I'm pretty seasoned in my career, confident in what I do. Actually really, really enjoying what I do too. I know, how to do my job, and I'm good at it. So I'm just doing my job. But over that 6 month to 1 year, and you're starting to find out the company dynamics and the politics and the players and who does what, with repeated situations that are some of my most challenging, right? And there's very a wall between it's a toxic relationship. I didn't know what a toxic relationship or environment was at the time. You Google it now. These are all the symptoms of the toxic relationship or environment. And I was in it, right? They're withholding information. They're not sharing information. Make it very difficult for me to be a part of the group. But once again, I'm in survival mode. I'm like, I don't care. These jokers don't want to I already know what I'm doing. I don't need to ask you what I'm doing, right? So, I bring with my essence and my leadership in that role and that solid foundation of the confidence of what I do bring and contribute to the world was the change factor. So because it was so toxic and there were so many challenges within that, the project that we were on almost came out to be a complete failure. We wasted so much time and money because of the toxic environment and not sharing information. It's amazing how much time and money can go down the tubes with those kinds of situations. So that's why I say it was a huge fail in the end. But because I just stayed true to myself and stood in that space and didn't cave in, and not only that, but in certain moments, I did all the right things and I stood up to the people at the top in the right ways. I was not making any friends. I mean, it was a complete, like I said, that it was a complete failure, but it changed that company. It eventually worked, changed the company and to create something new, even through all that resistance.
That's interesting. Okay, so I've got just a few more questions for you here today. Tell us about an experience that changed your paradigm for how you wanted to show up as a leader.
Ask me that one more time. Can you say it just the same way?
Yes. Tell us about an experience that changed your paradigm, the way you're thinking about things, for how you want to show up, how you wanted to show up as a leader.
I almost have to remind myself of this. So the paradigm that shifted for me was the leadership position that didn't exist that I created. And I think it was kind of like percolating all along, right? You get into these places where it's competitive. It's like, hey, I know how to do this and my way is the right way. And in the silence, because a lot of times I was standing out on an island by myself through this whole career thing. Somewhere in that silence, which I believe basically is your leadership. I call it your leadership essence, your greatness, right? Inside of there, something happens and it grows and it kind of knows what to do. And all I remember was, let me pull on the things that I really enjoy and that I like to do. I love to create a PowerPoint presentation, right? So, and I love numbers. As an engineer, I'm not good with writing. I would rather talk in numbers and in code than in English. So coming out of that and being, I'll say creative, right? That was also a term where I never felt comfortable claiming myself as creative because I grew up being told that I was the logical one in the family, right? So anyways, so I thought I'm going to pull on these things that I like and I'm just going to communicate this thing that's inside of me that just wants to come out. I would not have called it leadership in the moment, and I wouldn't have, like, all these other things that I could look on now, looking back on, totally leadership, right? But in the end, I'm just like, oh, how can I advocate for what's best? How can I, communicate to leadership what I believe is the best way to go, how to handle this, how to grow the company, all those things. I was like, how can I do that? So that question was basically the big driver. And then I would just pull on those, I like PowerPoint presentations. Why don't I try that? I had the flexibility and the comfort of being able to like listen to music at this job, right? So I could go in, which helped me kind of block off all these other influences in these cubicles whenever you hear the guys talking. And I could literally kind of show up and be the leader that I really was meant to be, and find that place of uniqueness. This is how I do it. I just didn't know it at the time. So that's my spin on leadership.
So with your wealth of experience, what's one piece of actionable advice that you'd like to leave listeners with today?
So, I have, I like to talk about my 5 natural steps to advancement, right? And I would say for anyone, of the 5 natural steps, I always say the very first one is the most important. It's dream. You need to dream about what you want in life. That's, if you do no other step, dreaming about it is probably the most important one. Because whether you realize you're turning your dream into a goal and creating results or not, it actually happens naturally. The last 2 steps are advance and sustain. And these 2, for women, they're notoriously the worst ones because we're taught to do something different. We're taught, to stay in our place, not make a fuss, to keep quiet. So even if you stay in your place and don't make a fuss and keep quiet, for you to get to the end of every day and just acknowledge your contributions and your work to the world, that could change everything. Is just really own it, because every day we actually change. Like looking back, right? Once I have decades worth of experience and I'm like, oh, how did I get here? I must have done something. I mean, it just doesn't materialize out of nowhere, right? And then I think, oh my gosh, it was that daily grind and that weekly effort, and somehow all those contributions certainly added up. Just to claim them.
I love that. Claim the work that you've done. Well, that brings us to the end today, Maria. And I know that, as always, you've got a quote for us. So what's our quote for today?
That's actually a perfect segue. So in closing, my inspirational quote is from Gloria Steinem. And it goes like this: the first problem for all of us is not to learn, but to unlearn.
Good one to noodle on.
Good one to noodle on. Cool. Mel, I can't thank you so much. That was fascinating. Thank you for bringing out some of those stories and for allowing me to share some of the stories that I did not certainly expect.
Oh, of course. This is my pleasure, Maria. This is fun.
Thank you for being a part of the conversation for inspiring women's leadership. Coffee Time with Kauffman is the comfortable place to discuss women's leadership, because I am on a mission to help the world discover the truth about what women are capable of. When you are ready for your leadership mastery makeover, go to mariakaufman.com and click on Consult a Coach, where you can schedule time with me for an empowerment session. Have a great week. Enjoy your adventures and journey responsibly.
Thanks, Maria.
Mel.
Have a great day, everybody.